Welcome to the You're Worth It podcast with Coach Ha-Keem. Career conversations with leaders you need to know. Well, welcome, Luna Kimal. You're my guest today on the You're Worth It podcast. I'm so pleased. This is the inaugural You're Worth It podcast, and you are my first guest. So welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And what an honor to be on your first inaugural podcast. So you have to promise me if you ever hit the milestone of this podcast that you'll have me back.
That's the deal. That's the deal. Well, it's
Cool.
just I'm always look forward to talking to you anyway. So this is a bit of
Same.
for our listeners. This is a bit of a reunion for Luna and myself. We worked together. Must have been almost a decade ago,
Yep.
and so this is bringing us back just to getting a chance to reconnect. So this is you can count on coming back. So
Thank
we'll
you.
be doing this hopefully for a while. To reach out and have you here today is to get a chance to let our listeners learn a little bit more about you. And so maybe if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of an overview of who is Luna.
Of course. Happy to. Thank you. So I'm Luna Kimal, and I am originally from Seoul, South Korea. I was born and raised there. I mention this always when I introduce myself, although it's not part of my career. It is important because where I'm from and my origin has impacted me a lot beyond just personal level in terms of the work ethics at work or the cultural sensitivity, and I think it carries with me. So I always mention that. I came here a couple of decades ago to the States, and I received my bachelor's degree in economics from University of Minnesota and my master's degree in human resources and change leadership from University of St. Thomas. I started my career in a business management role in financial services, given my econ major in undergraduate, excuse me. And I moved into the recruiting world because I found interest in people. And then I kind of moved my way up within the recruiting. And then I moved on to Cargill, where I met Ha-Keem. Like you mentioned, I think a little over a decade ago already. I worked in sourcing roles. I know time flies. Sourcing roles and talent management roles, yes. Before landing a role in people analytics, gosh, I think it was in 2015. It was a newly created people analytics function within the talent center of expertise at Cargill that time. And that has been my passion and my career for the past 8 years. So most recently, I worked for Indeed 5.5 years, about 2 years managing kind of a team of talented HR analytics professionals. And I got laid off from that role along with a lot of my other Indeed peers at the end of March. So here I am.
Well, and we're glad to have you. And I'm glad to share this platform with those that are listening, or those if they're able to are viewing this and learning a little bit more about you. I think it's important, and I'm gonna go ahead and shower you a little bit with just some of the praise, because it's when you and I were working together at Cargill, there wasn't a sourcing team, so it was an idea. There was a recruiting team, but there was this idea of starting a sourcing team, and I was tasked with building that team, and we could not fail. It was an area that we saw as growth, we saw as being critical. You mentioned inclusion, diversity, very important. I think as we built our reputation, that there were some pretty high goals in terms of bar set for performance that we were tasked with, and so because it couldn't fail, we needed to have the very best. And I remember during the interview process, thinking that, when I was talking with you, I'm thinking that this is someone that I think is going to excel, but I just didn't know how much, and how much your drive, you talked about that a little bit, was going to, you wouldn't let yourself not be successful. And therefore our team was going to be successful because of you. And it's been truly the conversations that you and I had throughout our time together in sourcing and building that team, building the credibility, were some of the funnest that I can think of. And so truly just, for those listening, for those seeing you, for those hearing a little bit about your story today, they're not going to get anyone better than you when it comes to just work ethic, commitment to excellence. And so that's just a little bit. I want them to hear more from you, and they can, listen to some of that. But one of the hardest things I think for a lot of people is to talk about themselves. What is, um, you know, as they ask you a question, something along the lines of, "What are you really good at? Can you tell me about it?" A lot of times that makes people uncomfortable, and which is why I ask it. So let me ask you, if you take a moment to think about what you're really good at, what would you say?
Well, great question to kick off. And I do agree. I think it makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I've learned over the years to kind of, own my strength as well as my weaknesses. And I think a lot of people should do that, particularly a lot of women should do that more. So I will own my strength, and I'll give you three actually instead of one. I think I'm really good at, to start with, I think I'm really good at asking questions before answering questions from my stakeholders. I'm a very inquisitive person, and Ha-Keem might recall that about me. But naturally, I have a lot of questions. Figuring it out, kind of solutions is an important task, but kind of figuring out why before jumping into how is really important to me. And it has become more and more important over the years as I grow my career within the people analytics, because a lot of times stakeholders come to people analytics with a specific kind of problem statements and specific solution in mind. They would expect us to kind of back it up with the data, which is important job of ours. But I think it's also pivotal for us to challenge those assumptions, ask thought-provoking questions, and coach and guide our stakeholders through identifying true underlying problems. Then we can form hypotheses and validate or challenge them using the data instead of jumping into how. Then a lot of times we just kind of end up, scratching the surface instead of getting into the real problems. So I
Okay.
think asking questions, yep, that's kind of first thing that I'm really good at. It doesn't always make people feel comfortable because they want a quick solution like this, and I just kind of try to ask questions before answering them. Second thing I would say is specifically in the analytics perspective, I'm really good at translating data points into business insights. I know it sounds so simple and basic, but I almost mean it literally when I say translating, because it's almost like interpreting between two languages. It's we can have all different kinds of data and all the automated dashboards, but if we can't really connect those data points and what they are telling us to real business problems, and more importantly, to the bottom line, to the ROI of the business, then those dashboards and solutions are not really serving the business. They're just self-serving. So as people analytics professional, I always try to link every data point, every findings, insights, and recommendations to its impact to the bottom line and ROI of the business. I have to clarify something here, though. Just because I see a lot of people analytics positions kind of meshing those two skills together. So kind of building solutions using your technical skills and interpreting them into the business terms. I see a lot of those skills kind of meshed into one people analytics role. And I would just have to say, I strongly challenge that structure actually. Building an automated solution is one skill set. I think interpreting them into a business problem or solutions, deep diving more into the data, intertwining them with different data, forming hypotheses, facilitating working sessions, validating or challenging those hypotheses, those are different skill sets. So I have to clarify, that being said, I'm not a coder or developer. I can use Tableau or Google Suites or Microsoft Suites front and back end, but I'm not a developer by training. Really, my strength is turning those data points into stories and then to action items and recommendations.
Yeah, I like what you did
Um,
there. There's a couple, the overall data analytics and the value that it can drive and bring to a business. What you did essentially is said, if you don't have that capability on your team today, you need it, and I think that's a good call out. In addition to that, you really highlighted and focused on just where your strengths are, and I think it was important because you did this when we worked together, and I think you continue to do this today. It sounds like, which is really tying in what are we trying to accomplish as a business. That's why you listen so hard at the beginning to really understand, not driving right into problem solving, but understanding the problem that they're trying to solve. And then the other thing I heard you say, which I can validate, this is what you do, is you really seek to understand what the business is trying to accomplish so that you can help the teams reach those goals. So I like that you call that out. I can validate that that is exactly what you do. And I think that is something that sets you apart. It is a differentiator because not everyone will look to say what problem are we really trying to solve, or are we truly solving a business problem. Sometimes they'll just say, hey, what do you need, and give that to me, and then I'll give that what you need back, but not go any further than that. And so I really like that you take the extra time to tie it to the business and to ensure that we're achieving what we need to achieve. So I appreciate that about you. And so as you're talking to these companies, as they're listening to you and they're listening to this podcast, it, just take a moment to let them know, why should they hire you?
Thanks for the great question. And by the way, thank you for from the bottom of my heart for a lot of great things that you say about me. I'm so humbled, and I'm so glad that you remember some of the things that we worked on together from over a decade ago. That just makes me feel like I've done something right. So thank
Oh,
you.
you have. Yeah. So no, that's the credit goes to you. So
Thank you. So to answer your question, I feel like I've just listed a lot of things that I can do well. So I want to shift a little bit to start answering your question. Instead of why hire me, I want to start with why hire people analytics or why build people analytics, because I think for a lot of companies, that's still a valid question. So for those companies who don't have an established people analytics team, or if you have technical folks, but not true analytics, I shouldn't say true, but not analytics folks who can interpret those technical data into the insights, then in my very biased opinion, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that companies can make. Companies often kind of make the mistake of not basing their decisions on data when it comes to the company's unarguably single most valuable asset, which is its people. We can all agree on that. When you think about it, we wouldn't make decisions without data in any other parts of the business. So why are we not using data when it comes to our people? So I truly believe people analytics can help organizations make better business decisions, not just better people decisions, but better business decisions using people data. So here's my pledge. Please consider adding that missing piece of the puzzle when you paint the big picture of your company's outlook, just by adding the people data into the formula. Review core people metrics on a regular basis, just like you do other core business metrics. You can hire me or you can hire anyone else in people analytics field. There's a lot of professional
no, hire
individuals out
Luna.
there.
Just to be clear, hire Luna. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. You can even start with one person. So, and for those companies who has established people analytics team, kudos to you. Again, in my opinion, you already have a huge competitive advantage. I feel like I've said a lot of great things about why you should hire me, but hit me up if you wanna hear more. I'd love to chat, and I'm sure you'll see the value.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we have a link to your LinkedIn profile on this episode. But I also like what you said there in terms of ensuring that we're thinking about we do metrics, our financial statements, how we're doing performing as a company, on operations if you're in manufacturing, or and how we're performing on that standard, and doing the same thing as we think about people, I think is an important investment. And so really, really glad that you call that out. And I think, again, just highlighting why organizations should hire you. And so the years, as you think through some of those key partnerships, if you think of one of the better ones, or like the best relationship that you had when it comes to a partner in the business, or a partner in a function, or wherever it may have been, you know, can you share a little bit more about what that looked like? What were some of the characteristics? What was maybe the situation that you were in? So going to my behavioral based interview questions perspective.
Thank you. Partnerships are so important in any roles, but in the roles that I've had over the years, particularly in people analytics, partnerships are extremely important. And I'm a connector. I love connecting with people. And when I say connector, it's not just connecting dots between different data points or connecting data into the insights. Connecting with people is so important. And analytics is not just a number, because at the end of the day, data is a data is a data. The data would tell us what it tells us, but data can only kind of raise the flags. That's how I look at it. So if it's a true yellow flag or true red flag, or if it's a false alarm, we can't do it without the partnership. That being said, I didn't know that being able to connect with people, learning what they do, connect teams with each other, I didn't know that was an actual skill set, because that comes pretty naturally to me. So I have to take this opportunity and give a shout out to my previous leader at Indeed, Katie Meager, for actually recognizing this as a skill set and putting it in my job title. But going back to the question, I think the best partnerships for that reason that I've experienced come from kind of cross-functional partnerships. I can say at Cargill and at Indeed, I've had some strong cross-functional partnerships between the people analytics team, who are data and analytics experts, and then also with HR COE leaders who are experts in their own HR areas, such as recruiting, performance, DEI, training, total rewards, and many more. And then lastly, but not leastly, with a business team, like business HR or business leaders themselves, the power of this partnership comes from co-creating stories. So at the end of the day, again, data can tell us what data tells us, but we need to link them to the business context. We need to link them to specific HR knowledge or specific HR initiatives that are going on, so we can paint the entire picture and present them to our leaders instead of just throwing them the data and what data is telling us. So that's the first example of great partnership. The second one is a little more specific. At Indeed, I launched something we call talent lifecycle solutioneering sessions. The idea really comes about tackling a specific question or pain point across different functions within and outside HR. So let's just say, I'll give you a quick example. Let's say a question was brought up. Hey, I noticed over the past quarter, we've seen an increased turnover of women who have been with this company for less than a year. So what's going on? When a problem like this actually emerges in a more conventional model, we often expect a specific HR COE team, so in this case, it would be recruiting function, to identify and solve the problem. This talent lifecycle solutioning session started with my idea or question: what if a problem or a solution or both exists somewhere else outside that specific HR function? What if we can work on solutioning together across different functions? And most realistically, a lot of times it's combination of factors contributing to that problem. So recruiting practice might contribute to this problem partially, but what if other reasons kind of come from other areas throughout our employees' talent life cycle, such as onboarding, training, manager effectiveness, inclusion, or compensation, or anything in between? So I kind of started gathering different cohorts for a limited time of cross-functional HR team members, and often involving the business representation themselves as well. And we have had one of the boldest, most transparent, pushing the envelope kind of conversations to solve the puzzle together. And I have to be honest, I facilitated the sessions and did analysis based on our co-created hypothesis. But once I did that, the conversations just rolled in. I didn't have to do much because it happened so organically. Everybody was just so thirsty for these kind of conversations. And it was just a great learning experience for everyone involved. So I highly recommend that kind of cross-functional working sessions, because you'll be surprised how much of, even within HR, how much of a problem or pain point in one area affects the rest of the HR practices and the business. And I know when you think about it, it's a no-brainer for us, but actually a lot of times if you work in one area in HR, it's hard to kind of get grasp of what's going on in the other areas and how it might impact or contribute or play the codependent role with each other, when it comes to our employees' kind of talent life cycle. So that should be my other example.
Yeah, well, so one, kudos to you, and I think you continue to give the listener and those looking online example after example of how you take the problem to be solved and you expand in terms of truly understanding what we're trying to accomplish and pulling the relevant pieces in. And so if we're not bringing in the business, bring in the business. If we're not solving an issue that's going to drive to the bottom line, let's find out why we're not going to the bottom line. If we take one situation and we think it's in a vacuum, let's make sure that we're looking up and down the realm cross functionally and across the organization as to what might be driving the real issue there. And so you really take what sometimes can be viewed as a simple, yeah, here, just look at this, do that. That isn't really solving the issue or the problem, or maybe even the root of the problem. And you really get to that. And so that curiosity that you talked about, in addition to really understanding data analytics, but more than that, really understanding the problem you're trying to solve as a business. I think that's what a wonderful example of how you brought that cross-functional team together, to have that open, honest forum to address that. So kudos to you for that.
Thank
And
you.
so, well, yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions that interviewers always ask, right? So I did this in my days in recruiting, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, but the typical situation, behavior, outcome. Tell me about a time when you had to work with someone who was difficult to work with. And so, what can you think of a situation like that? What was that like? What was the situation? You don't have to name names, but what was the situation?
Thank
How did
you.
it turn out?
Yeah, thanks for this great question. Yeah, I kind of saw this question coming. Um, so I mentioned a few minutes ago, Hakeem, that stakeholders often come to us with a specific problem statement and solution even in mind when it comes to people problem. In other words, a lot of times they often have their own story or hypothesis kind of formulated already. They just need data to back it up, right? Which I truly appreciate because it's a lot easier to start analysis with some kind of hypothesis or even anecdotes rather than starting with a blank canvas. I think the challenge becomes a challenge when stakeholders kind of refuse to be open-minded about changing their stance or changing their initial hypothesis. So when the initial analysis clearly challenges their initial hypothesis instead of supporting them, most stakeholders get genuinely excited because they want to dig deeper and really identifying the real underlying problems together. Other times, I've had a few stakeholders that would ask us, okay, can you conduct analysis, but a little differently? Okay, another set of analysis, and maybe a few more. And really kind of what they were hoping is that they would see a different result that would actually back up their initial kind of hypothesis. So, when a thought is formulated already, again, that's not a bad thing, but I always think that we should be open-minded, that could be challenged. And to be honest, that's the beauty and the most value-adding parts of the data, right? That challenges our hypothesis. If we know all the problems and answers already, then we wouldn't need the data or we wouldn't need the analysis. So I believe, honestly, a lot of times this happens because leaders are not always equipped with kind of time or resources or efforts into this people analytics space, but rather they're kind of pressured almost to go find a quick solution and implement it and solve the people problems. So it's not always on the stakeholders, but that was kind of the challenging parts of it, is that okay, we can conduct another analysis, but that's not going to change the story because the data is telling us otherwise. And let's instead be open-minded and let's kind of open our options to different stories instead of the initial story that you had formulated. So that was the
Yeah.
approach I took.
The beauty of the data is it's telling us whatever it's telling us, right? And so it may be giving us a different narrative to tell, and encouraging leaders to be open and think about that, I think, is important. And that can be difficult, especially if they keep asking you to run it again. And maybe but just use these parameters, maybe not the ones you used before, because it's not what I'm looking for. So, so
Actually,
anyway, that does make sense. So, well, real quick, I'm going to go rapid fire. Give me some career highlights, something that you want to make sure that the listener, those watching online, know about you.
thank you. So I mentioned that I've been in people analytics for the past 8 years. when I look back now after a couple decades of the career experience or experience in corporate America, I think one of the highlights is overall kind of expanding and growing my career very organically. I didn't step into my career after college and thinking I would be in people analytics. So, although my analytics career officially kicked off 8 years ago, when I think about my first role in recruiting, so I started as a business manager in financial services, but I really found myself enjoying the people side of my job so much. I wanted people to be my product. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's when I kind of transitioned into HR and starting in recruiting. Being someone with quantitative aptitude with an econ degree, it was hard for me to kind of not to measure my recruiting performance beyond like number of requisitions to fill or time to fill. I was crushing those goals anyways. But what about the quality of hires? What about the quality of hires? Do my hires really stay? Do they perform? Do they get promoted? What about my recruiting practices? Am I an efficient and effective recruiter to my hiring managers? Are there things that I could have captured better from the hiring manager or from the business that would have improved the quality of my hires? Those lingering questions, just I couldn't shake them off. That's when I started kind of designing additional measurement tools and metrics simply to measure my own performance within the first year of my recruiting career. So I created surveys for hiring managers throughout the different time frame. I started monitoring the retentions and promotion rates of my hires. And this actually ended up being implemented in my previous company as a company-wide onboarding program. So I didn't know that this was kind of like, paving my way into the analytics. But when I think about it, really that quantitative aptitude and how to apply it to my role, that's kind of, that had built foundation of my analytics career before I even became part of the people analytics professionals. And when I was asked to become a part of a newly established HR analytics team at Cargill in 2015 under Roxanne Laxo, I think that was the pivotal moment that when all of my experiences in business and recruiting and management and sourcing and talent management all came together because I could finally use my quantitative aptitude and those kind of inquisitiveness into a wider spectrum of HR practices. So that's kind of first highlight. The second one is I kind of hesitated to say this, but I know it sounds kind of weird, and I don't know if I'm qualified to say this because I'm still kind of fresh off from being ripped from Indeed. So I might have a different answer if you ask me this question after a couple of months and if I'm still in the same boat. But I think getting laid off for the first time in my career might go down as one of the highlights in my, hopefully near future. And it's not because it's so pleasant and it's so easy, right? That's not true at all. And in fact, it has been filled with self-doubts and it has been more struggling days than good days. It has been emotional roller coaster. So I just have to derail a little bit and just say this. If you are in the same boat with me, I feel you. Let's stand in solidarity together. Let's, root for each other. Let's support each other. But the reason that I think this might be reflected as a highlight in my career is it's because I'm truly feeling the power of my network and community. I'm humbled and surprised that literally almost all the leaders that I have worked for in my career for the past couple of decades reached out to me, offered the support, offered making connections, shortly after I shared my news on LinkedIn. So really, I think it's opened the door to me to meet new people, kind of consider different unconventional like opportunities as well. So it's been kind of fun. It's I mean a month ago, think about it, I would have never ever imagined in my wildest dream that I would be the first guest on Ha-Keem's podcast. So that's the silver lining of this whole
No, it's
experience.
cool. It is cool, and that's the thing. What you just said really brought me back to a lot of our conversations and the transparency that you bring. I think allowing people just to see, being vulnerable, but allowing them to kind of hear a little bit about your journey. I think that's important, and also giving them encouragement as we talk through what's happening with you. And so it's again one of the things that I truly appreciate about you, and hopefully I think the listener gets the chance to hear and see a little bit about that today. So last thing, any words of wisdom, any lasting impressions you want to give? You've shared a lot of information today. I think people learn a lot about you. We're going to get this out, and we're going to talk to people, and they're going to see, who you are career wise, who you are as an individual, which I think is a wonderful person. And so any kind of words of wisdom, lasting impressions you want to leave with us?
Of course, I have three quotes that I try to remember at all times, personally and professionally. I'm not going to elaborate too much on each of them just because they are so powerful as they are, I think. The first one is a famous quote by Wayne Gretzky, which is, you miss 100% of shots you don't take. I think of this quote when I find myself being risk averse. The second one is, a lot of leaders have said this, including Peter Drucker, and that is, you can't manage what you can't measure. And I might be biased because I'm an analytics person, but I truly believe we need to know, we need to measure where we are currently in order to make improvements in the future. So that's a second quote. The third one is, I don't think it's really a quote. I don't know where it originated from, but I always try to remember that feedback is a gift. I try to give feedback just like giving gift, with genuine care and genuine intentions. And I try to receive the feedback, and this is easier said than done, with gratitude. Just like any gift we receive for our birthdays or holidays, we might not like all of them. We might not use all of them. But I think feedback truly is a gift, whether it's a positive one or constructive one. So those are kind of like the three quotes that I literally have in front of my laptop and in front of my monitor. And I try to, let them guide me through when I have to make important decisions.
Well said. Not much to add to that. And so let me just wrap up our conversation today with saying thank you, Luna, for coming in, being my first guest on the You're Worth It podcast. I'm so excited. Couldn't have asked for a better first guest. And so we'll have to have you on again in the future. We'll get this out to people, but I think they're going to, when they get a chance to learn a little bit more about you, I think they're going to like who they see, like who they meet. And so best of luck. We'll talk again soon, but thank you for this today. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you.
Same, and thanks for having me. Thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm also a little anxious. I feel like I'm gonna get like exposed, but I like it. I'm trying to push myself outside my comfort zone. So thanks for having me again, Ha-Keem.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the You're Worth It podcast. Our goal here is to help everyone achieve their career dreams. Take a minute to like our content, review our books, and never forget, you're worth it. For more You're Worth It podcasts, career insights, merchandise, and exclusive content, check out CoachHakeem.com.